There is possibly no living writer that better understands both what it feels like to be a kid and what it feels like to have once been a kid than Stephen King. And if you doubt that, then you clearly did not read King's novel It once when you were 12, then again 27 years later when you were 39. Reading the novel when you share the age of the protagonists in both time periods will give you an almost Proustian perspective on adolescence looking forward to adulthood, while at the same time illuminating that youth from the standpoint of a grown-up who somehow let it slip away. It may sound like fulsome praise to frame King's novel in such existential terms, but only if you haven't read it from both sides of that tunnel. In 2017, Andy Muschietti tackled the daunting task of trying to adapt half of King's 1,100-page novel into a feature film, and by general consensus succeeded with flying colors. Many critics praised the pacing, tone, editing, cinematography, and the nuts and bolts mechanics of good horror filmmaking that characterized Part 1, and deservedly so. But for me, what really made the film work was that it captured that evanescent quality of what it feels like to be a 12-year-old kid, afraid that you don't fit in, afraid of growing up, and afraid of the slowly dawning realization that you and everyone you love will someday die. It's not easy to capture that spirit in a film, especially one that features a killer clown at its center, but Muschietti managed to pull it off. Adapting the second half of King's novel in Part 2 was surely no less daunting of a task. Nostalgia for one's lost youth by necessity can't quite strike the exact same chord as the youth itself. The loss of innocence changes everything. And while many of the core elements for capturing that nostalgic spirit are present in It Part 2, the revelry of reuniting with old friends, the bittersweetness of going by an old house, the grasping at memories that are just barely there in the corners of your mind, unfortunately, those elements do not coalesce to capture the experience of looking back at youth as well as Part 1 captured the passage through it. That's not to say the film doesn't deliver on many fronts. The adult cast, most notably Bill Hader, who steals the show as Richie Tozier, and Bill Skarsgård, who returns as Pennywise, give solid performances overall. The aforementioned nuts and bolts horror film mechanics are still top-notch, and many of the key notes from King's novel are present without slavishly trying to capture everything. Part 2 remains a far better adaptation of a King story than the average movie based on his work by far. At the same time, however, the film pales in comparison to its predecessor. Perhaps this film would have worked better if the producers had enough faith in the project to make both films simultaneously rather than waiting on the success of Part 1 before committing to making Part 2. There's a lingering sense in the film that it needs to keep backfilling itself with scenes from the child actors that the filmmakers didn't realize needed to be there until they went forward to make the second film. And the film tongue-in-cheek admits that, like many King stories, the ending is something of a letdown. Given that the film had 33 years to take a mulligan and craft a more satisfying ending, it's a little disappointing that they gave such a milquetoast conclusion to such an ambitious story. 3 out of 5 stars. See it, but with appropriate expectations.